Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We're with our final guest of April. We've had a lot of Tuesdays this month of April, five of them. But Dr. Jenny Hughes, one of my dear friends and former colleagues at when we lived in New Orleans together, is here with us today. We're going to talk all things connection. She is a psychologist and the founder of the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective, which I'm sure she'll give us a little more insight into, but it's an awesome community. And I'm so excited to have her here. So thank you so much for being with us, Jenny.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
So we've been talking about spring into, and we've had four other power words. Power was the first, confidence. Well, let's see if I can remember my own words. Confidence, action, growth, and then today connection. So I think when we really build on all of them, we need them all, and they all really go hand in hand. And I'm so excited about this topic specifically because it's great if we're doing things and feeling powerful and confident in our own selves. But I think that really can be magnified and taken to a whole nother level when we do it with other people. And so I think that this idea of connection to self is probably a theme we can talk a little bit about, but just connection to others and finding our tribes and communities and how powerful that can be. So I'm going to dive in with sort of one of my first questions. How do you sort of create connection in your life, or what do you kind of think of it? How do you embody that in your own personal day to day?
Yeah, I think that for me, kind of two broader categories are coming up. So there's connection in my professional life and then connection in my personal life. And those are not mutually exclusive because I'm the same person, whether I'm like being a trauma therapist or I'm being a friend or a mom or whatever. But they're different types of connection and they serve different roles. Um, And like you're saying, experiences are just naturally enhanced when we either do them together or we're able to tell someone about it. So it doesn't always have to be in-person connection, although that is incredible. And there's just such a magic when you're in a physical space with someone. But I think a lot of it starts with shared experiences. So like for me on the personal side, I remember I've lived in a bunch of places. And when I moved from New Orleans to Houston, it was really hard.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I New Orleans was the first place since Colorado, which is where I'm from, that I actually felt like I had created a community and like I belonged. And
Mhm.
so I lost that sense of belonging, right? And I had no one. And Houston is ginormous. And unless you live right next to someone, you're not going to see them. Um, and it really wasn't until I actually met someone else who was from New Orleans that I was able to start kind of building a friendship. And
Mhm.
we also had another similarity of we both had kids that are like right around the same age. So there were these like little variables that fell into place of these shared experiences that were already bringing us together through our kids. And
Yeah,
then we could naturally talk about things that we couldn't really talk to other people about because New Orleans is
wouldn't
a
get
really
it.
weird place.
It is.
Yeah.
As someone who's lived there and knows you from there, if you don't know it, you don't know it. So that is very
Right,
true.
exactly. And so having these like kind of shared experiences and backgrounds made it so much
Mhm.
easier. And it was kind of this snowball effect of like, once she and I became friends, I started to feel more grounded here. And then it was
Mm.
like, it made it easier to connect with other people because I didn't
Yes,
feel as lonely.
yes.
And then on the professional side, the Brave Collective is such a perfect example because it's all about creating community and connection for trauma therapists. And so connecting around our experiences of what it's like to be trauma therapists and to do trauma work, and also like not just the heavy stuff, but all of the beautiful gifts that we get in our work as trauma
Mm.
therapists. And it's not until we get to share about those gifts that it really enhances that experience for us. And when we have those connections with people and we get to talk about our experiences, we get to have experiences alongside of each other, it creates this really powerful like energy.
Yeah.
And it's almost like this renewable energy source. I talk about it in a lot of ways where it's one last thing we have to do, add to our to-do list,
Mhm.
but it is renewing our it's nourishing us, it's giving us that motivation, that excitement, whatever it is that you're looking for. So connection is so incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and as someone who has also moved a lot, I can feel that feeling of what it's like to leave a place that you feel so connected and have such a good community to a place that you have nothing. And it's not to say that that can't come over time and whatever else, but it sucks. It's like that growing pain of moving where there's so much reward in changing it up and seeing new things, but it's like I forget how hard it is every time until I'm in the worst part of it. And it's just a real thing. Like we're a tribal people. We were not meant to just be singular and be by ourselves. Those people didn't last long back in the day because you needed everyone to do the different things, to have the skills to look out for you. You know, one person can't do it all. And I think that despite being in a world now where we have so much access to people and information, I think unfortunately we're seeing that we're the least connected that we've ever been on some levels, which is just kind of mind blowing because in theory you'd say that doesn't make sense, but I think it's because the connection isn't as deep and meaningful, right? We both moved to bigger cities after smaller towns where we really felt connected. And just because I'm around a lot of humans in Miami doesn't mean I feel connected to anyone here, right? So there's a difference
Mhm.
between, like you said, that shared experience, those deeper roots, and that idea of we can exchange and both grow and learn from each other. But there's probably that element of safety and trust that has to come with it, right? Um,
Absolutely, and that does take time to develop. And
mhm,
like, I mean, like you're talking about the lone, there actually is like a loneliness epidemic that is going on.
mhm,
It has been declared, right?
yeah.
And I think often too, well, I don't think that we can discount COVID,
No,
and the
there's a
impact
huge
that that
piece of it.
had
Mhm,
on a lot of these things were already building. And then obviously, like we all did isolate, like we had to isolate. But then in the past couple of years, it feels like on one hand, we're just trying to make up for lost time. And so then
mhm,
everyone is burning out. And when you burn out, whether it is personally, professionally, whatever, a lot of times we then isolate again because it
yeah,
feels like it's the way to renew our energy. And perhaps we are do not have the opportunity to grow relationships in gradual ways so that that safety and trust can develop over time and can
mhm,
be a really strong net for whatever is going to happen in that relationship. And
right.
so I think a lot of us right now are experiencing almost like this just like yo-yo effect of like
Mm.
super isolation in 2020, 21, to like everything exploded
They do
in
it all again.
2022, 23. And
Yeah,
now we're like, okay, wait, one, we didn't talk about any of that. And two, like, what the hell? Now what do I
yeah,
do? Because I'm so freaking tired
yeah,
and I just like don't have anything in me. And yet we are these relational creatures. We can't survive without relationships.
right. No, it's so true, and I'm reading this book too right now. It's called On Our Best Behavior by Elise Loehnen, and essentially the 7 deadly sins and how they've been used to keep women in our place, so to speak,
Mm,
even if you're religious or not, and how it permeates throughout history and culture. But on this topic of envy, she talks about how we have been ingrained, like she calls it like that traumas in our DNA of you're going to take what I need, that scarcity mentality. You know, I'm going to cut people down first because I need to like preserve myself. And a part of that is that lack of trust, that lack of connection that we as females often are taught to not feel with other females in
mhm,
particular, and what it would how transformative it would be if we could see that there's enough at the table for everyone. What would it mean to really connect, and what would it mean to not play out this cyclical violence in a way that we've continued to just project on ourselves? We keep ourselves in that box like the patriarchy wants us to. So it's just been an interesting piece too of just like how connection can be so disrupted even by generational just experiences and information that we might say, I don't prescribe to that. I'm a feminist. And yet we partake in it every day. And so it's really also
mhm.
got me thinking in this other level of connection, even to ourselves. We're holding ourselves back in that way, and we're holding other women or other individuals back as well. Um, but how that disrupts connection too, and why it doesn't feel natural because it
Mhm.
isn't. It's going against what we innately want to do.
And I think that, I mean, one, that's like resonates so much with me and it really I mean, it just rings true. And I think that it like brings us back to the importance of kind of the like shared spaces, shared
Mhm.
interests, shared experiences, and even like problem solving together,
Yeah.
right? So solving a problem with someone is a really powerful bonding experience. You're
Yeah.
able to overcome, you go through this whole like arc of emotions together,
I'm thinking
and
of
then you
building
come out on
IQ
the other
furniture
side.
together. You and your partner.
Exactly.
If you can do it, you will last in your marriage, right? Like we
Right,
didn't kill
exactly.
ourselves. Got it. Okay. Better all the
Exactly.
things.
And we don't have very much of that built into our lives anymore, right? I mean, even and as adults, it's like making friends and connections as an adult. That's like a whole other like we could just
Well, other
do, like a
category.
whole
Yeah.
series on that.
Yeah.
But even like at work, like if for people who work even in person, it feels so isolated. You're like in your little office or cubicle. There's not a whole lot of like interacting except for in really awkward meetings where you're just being like
Right.
mansplained and told what to do and told what a
Right.
terrible employee you are.
Right.
Or like you work from home and perhaps you have a bit more autonomy, but then you're just kind of like by yourself and on a screen all day. And
Yeah.
so we have, like you're saying, even more access in a lot of ways, but then there's so many structures that are keeping us isolated. And so we can't build safety and trust because we don't
Right.
know who we can trust.
Mm,
We haven't solved any problems or overcome any challenges together.
right. Right. And how does that sort of tie into your membership group? Kind of like how did I imagine connection was a big piece of why you built it, in addition to solving other problems. But how does that sort of play out in your Brave group? And yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, so for trauma therapists, like we're encountering problems every day. We're helping our clients through the traumatic experiences that they've experienced in their lives. We also often have our own history of trauma, big T, little t. We all experience stress and trauma. And so for trauma therapists, a lot of times we can feel really isolated because, and I think a lot of therapists in general, but there are so many messages that like, oh, you're a therapist, you should have like all your shit together and have no problems. And if you are affected by this work, then you're definitely not cut out for it. And you should just
Mhm.
not do it and like go like be a barista. And I actually they're kind of therapists too in a way.
Yep.
They
Hairstylists,
hear a lot of
baristas,
stuff.
all those people. God bless them.
Exactly. I know. But so there are already like these shared experiences of challenges of being a trauma therapist. And in a space like the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective, we get to help each other with those things. So it's
Mhm.
a space where there is a shared understanding that we're going to show up as our real selves. We're going to show up messy. We're going
Mhm.
to show up with integrity and with compassion, but we don't have to be perfect. And when we all know that those are the rules, that's the game, then we can ask for help and we can give help, and
Hmm.
that giving and receiving creates it helps. It's kind of like that problem solving where when I ask for help and then someone reaches out and gives it to me, we're starting to build that safety and trust. And
Yeah.
it's a slow process, right?
Yeah.
It takes time, and it takes a lot of guts to reach out and ask for help too. And so
Mhm.
one thing that I really try to do is when members join Brave is that I reach out individually because I want them to know, like, hey, like, come jump in the group, like, come to a call, come, jump into our consultation chat, like whatever it is, just to start to get that ball rolling. Because
Yeah.
sometimes that's the hardest thing is taking the first step, and
Yeah.
whether again like that's professionally or personally. This friend I was talking about earlier, we were like set up by another neighbor in our neighborhood because she
Love
was
that.
like, oh my God, you both have kids that are the same age. You should be friends. And then fortunately, we liked each other and we had a
Right.
lot of shared background, but we didn't seek each other out. Like someone else was like, you need to be friends.
Right.
And
Right.
so, that process, sometimes we do need to help it along, and that's okay. But
Mhm.
when we have that back and forth, it really helps us to experience that connection, and then it just is really healing and supportive and powerful in so many ways.
Yeah. No, that sounds like an awesome group you have created and really thinking holistically about the whole experience of being a trauma therapist and what's needed. And I've definitely hopped in and been able to participate in some of the things that you offer. And so I can speak to how great of a group it is and how powerful it is. And it's true, even though I don't know many of the other people and they're not in there as regularly. I know you, but just it felt so comfortable and like already a built space where we could just talk because of the trust that we have. But I think that, and like your friend who said, oh, I trust her enough to trust. So it's just like that connector spirit and how we might find each other in random ways. Our friendship story is one for the ages. We don't have time to get into it all, but
I
like
know.
we know each other because of very weird reasons, because we know random people who are like, you need to know these people.
And all the stars had to align.
Yes. And so it was like a very specific meetup. But I think that just shows the power of what can happen when you don't hoard everything for yourself and you really start to link and pair people up, because the friendship we have is never going to be threatened by the friendship that I might introduce you to other people, because it's going to be different. If anything, it just makes it all richer. We all know who everyone is. We can all now be a bigger group. And I think that's just a helpful other reminder of, again, connection can look so many ways, but each part of it is really essential and important.
And I think also like honoring that connection is scary,
Mhm.
especially for those of us who've experienced trauma like attachment wounds in childhood, in adolescence, and adulthood. You can get an attachment wound anytime. But you know, connecting and opening yourself up is really scary. And so we're
Yeah.
talking about it in very positive ways, and all the things that we're saying I think are true. But I also just want to acknowledge that I can't
Yeah.
help it because I'm a trauma
No,
therapist,
it's important.
of just saying like it's okay if you're scared to connect,
Mhm.
and to acknowledge at the same time like your body's pull towards relationships. Both
Yeah.
of those things can be true. And when you think about some of the things we're talking about, of like shared experiences, problem solving together, allowing for people to make connections for you, those can be
Mhm.
some of like the stepping stones to finding and really building the relationships that you're craving.
Yes, definitely. Because I would love to meet a person who hasn't been burned by a connection at some
Right.
point. But I think for every time we have, I wonder how many really positive ones we've had too. And that could be as simple
Yeah.
as the nice lady at Target who checked you out, to a best friend you found, to a pet that saved you in some way. So I think it's just remembering the balance, but there is risk
Mhm.
in trying again when something has hurt us in some capacity. And for some, that
Yep.
wound is much bigger and pervasive, and for others, they might be smaller, but it's all relative at some point.
Mhm.
Um, what would be just like some little takeaways if you had a couple words of wisdom for folks of how to sort of build, maintain, or foster connections? What do you want to leave people with?
Well, I would encourage you to think about kind of what of the things that you and I have discussed today, what feels easiest for you? Is
Mm,
it like going and finding a meetup group around a shared interest and meeting someone there? Is it reaching out to someone who maybe you kind of like fell out, or your things just sort of you haven't been in touch with them as much, and
yeah.
maybe it's as simple as shooting them a text? Is it like, finding kind of through that triangulation, like figuring out who can connect you with new people, but
Hmm.
thinking about
Mhm.
like what is the easy when as we've been talking, what is like the one thing that stood out to you and seems to be the most doable, the lowest hanging fruit, just to again get that ball rolling, just like I do in Brave, where I reach out to everyone individually to say like, hey, I'm so
Yeah.
excited you're here, like
Yeah.
these are great ways for you to connect. That is my hope, that that can help to get this snowball started. So what's that one thing for you? And even go back and re-listen to some of the things, and see if there's something else, or maybe you didn't hear it at first and you needed to kind of re-listen to catch it.
I love that. Thank you so much. I think this has been a really helpful conversation. I think it really tops off, again, all the stuff we've been talking about. You need that confidence to take the leap. You need to trust in yourself. You need to actually take the action. That connection produces and encourages growth in yourself and how you can help others grow. So I think this is just such a beautiful ending to our April talk. Jenny, what are some places? Where are some places now? Where are some places people can find you, or is there anything important or specific you want to let us know that's coming up, or um, that we should know about?
Yeah, so for anyone listening who is a therapist or a grad student or a pre-licensed therapist, if you're going into the mental health field and you want to check out the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective, go to braveproviders.com and you can find kind of all the things. On there, you'll also find my free vicarious trauma tracker, which is a great way for you to start to understand how vicarious trauma shows up in your brain and body, and then to start giving you some tools to manage it in realistic ways.
Yep.
For folks who maybe are in another kind of helping profession, but are not necessarily like a mental health provider, I also have a Facebook group that's kind of more broad for any kind of helper or healer. It's called the Brave Vicarious Trauma Community, and I'm sure we'll be able to link to all of this stuff. But that can be a really nice support as well, to know that there's a space where we can talk about these things. And that's a free Facebook group. And with other people who really value being able to name this stuff and to show up for each other in just authentic and supportive and compassionate ways.
I love it. Yes, in the email on Jenny's picture and in her bio, there's links to lots of different places where you can find her, and all roads lead to Rome, as they say. So if you click on one, you'll probably be able to get to the others through there as well. So thank you so much for being here. As we close out April, I have some really exciting topics and guests coming up in May, so you don't want to miss out. But have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.